Hello, hello, hello. Good morning to my friends. My name is Patty Mason, also known as Pepperspray Patti, and I am an independent women's self-defense instructor. And we're trying something a little bit new today. I am going live. Check out the lighting here. So went live on YouTube, kind of got the office set up a little differently with the computer and a camera, so I thought I'd try this. But I want to get into this whole debunking these domestic violence myths. And in the last video, I did talk about the myth that it's easy for a victim to leave their abuser. And we talked about how it's actually the complete opposite, that, you know, just like any other relationship, um, it isn't easy. And it's even, I think it's even harder in an abusive relationship because um, in a normal relationship, there's in a normal, healthy relationship, there's an ability for everybody, for each person to be able to safely and comfortably express themselves. Where in an abused relationship, you have one partner is manipulating and controlling the other partner. And so therefore this imbalance is also a factor in making it difficult. But definitely hop on over to that video to hear the discussion and leave your comments and share with others who are struggling with why is it so hard to leave an abusive relationship. So that gets us into today. And today we're going to talk about another myth that I, like so many others, believe is true. And that is that abusers are angry or have an anger problem. This is definitely something that that I thought, I assumed, like most people do. And so what's dangerous about this myth is that, well, one, it's not true, that many of abusers are actually quite the opposite. And it's not that they have an anger problem, it's that they have a control problem. And they feel that they need to have power and control over another person. Most of the time, it's because of a lack of power and control in some aspect of their life, whether it be at that moment or something that happened years ago in their past. Or, a lot of times, if you look at the psychology of abusers and predators, um, you see things in their past and in their childhood of um, above it. There's a difference between an overbearing parent and a controlling parent. And so you will see abuse and manipulation in their childhood. And it becomes a learned pattern. And for many abusers, and I think that this was part of my situation and my experience is, think about habits. And what were you taught in your childhood that became lifestyle habits in your adulthood? And that goes to how we react to to other people and to experiences. And I believe that he learned through his experiences growing up and in childhood, he learned um, how to treat people. And he also learned how uh, people treated him. And that's what were big factors in forging who he is to this day. And who he is a victim. Like most predators, they have one, been a victim, and two, they feel that victimization and they have not been able to. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know the right words, but there's a when you've been victimized, think about, like, I think about years ago, my car was broken into. And I remember um, for the next few days, like, I was constantly at the window peeking through the curtains and the blinds um, because I felt vulnerable and exposed, um, even though it was my car, and nothing was taken. It's the fact that not far from my house, somebody decided to vandalize something that was mine, in trying to take it and things in it. Um, and and I felt very exposed and vulnerable. And so, I was hyper vigilant on locking the doors and the windows, and anyone walking down the street, it suddenly became, are they trying to break it? You change. Well, eventually that, wore off, and I was able to mentally overcome or move on from that experience. And I think that what happens is that there are people that, especially when it happens over years, so for example, children that have been abused and manipulated and controlled at a very higher level of extremity, that creates this continual victim, and they never actually move on from those experiences. And so that's my little psychological insight into it. But ultimately, we're talking about predators. And it's important to understand the mindset of a predator. This is why, something that is always talked about in my self-defense classes and is the first thing that we talk about, because once you understand the mindset of a predator, it is easier to then understand why boundaries are important, and why um, de-escalation in a situation is not crying, begging, or pleading, because those are all ways that you can show that person that they are actually having that power and control over you, which is exactly what they want. And we don't want them to have that, because the person who's in control of the situation is the person who is going to be the one that gets away safely and successfully. So, knowing that um, predators, and I use that word predators, and a lot of people kind of look funny because we're talking about abusers. And when we think predators, we think of those lurking in the dark, looking to, hurt someone, attack someone, rape someone. Well, as a society, we, for whatever reason, refuse to register the fact that a predator can be somebody that you know and love. And once we have fully grasped the fact that this person, um, my abuser, was a predator. My abuser was also my husband, the person that I loved and lived with and had committed to. But first and foremost, they were a predator. And they showed their true colors. And a predator is someone who wants to have power and control over another person. And most predators feel that victimized and they're the victim. And even though I'm not the one who created that and victimized him or made him the victim, I then became the target of that. And because his feeling of being a victim, as this lifelong victim, he felt he had the right, that he had earned the right to hurt another person because of how much he has been hurt over his life. Now, just because you understand the mindset of a predator does not mean that their actions are okay. I am definitely not the person who says, well, listen, I understand what happened to my abuser when he was a child and why he has become the adult that he is. And so understanding that helps me to move on and overcome the experience. It does not give me or give him justification for his actions. And I want to be clear on that because a lot of times people will be like, well, this whole thing about understanding our predator, understanding our attacker, understanding our abuser is just giving them the justification for their actions. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, understanding a predator's mindset, understanding who it is that you are up against, who it is that is attacking you, abusing you, hurting you, helps you to be safe and to overcome and to move on. It has nothing to do with them. It has to do with us. Once I understand the predator mindset, I understand that they want to have power and control over another person. That is their goal. That is their end game. And I understand that they do it from a place of a victim. And because they feel so victimized, that they feel that they have the right to hurt me. Therefore, I understand that things like crying and begging and pleading and take me, leave my daughter, don't hurt, I'll let you hurt, I'll let you do whatever you want to me if you don't hurt my kids. That doesn't work. That they're not like, oh, there's no sympathy, there's no remorse, there's no concern, there's no compassion. And you need to fully understand that when a predator is abusive and is caught in that abuse, the next day they show up with flowers, they're remorseful, they're sympathetic, apologetic, um begging for your forgiveness. It's not because they feel remorse. You need to understand that they do not feel remorse. What they feel is that they are potentially losing what it is that they have power and control over. They don't care that they don't think of you as another human being. You are a thing that they have power and control over. Again, you need to understand that. I don't tell you their psychology so that for them, it's for you. You need to understand that it is most likely, especially when there are multiple apologies for the same actions, that the reality is that person doesn't see you as another human being. They don't truly feel remorse for how you feel. They feel remorse that what they did put that they're vulnerable to being exposed and being caught. Are we clear on that? And I say it this way because we don't get that. We think that that sympathy and that remorse is actually that they care about us, but you need to understand the mindset of a predator. If I'm a predator and I hurt you, you could expose me. And that's dangerous because once I'm exposed, I'm not going to be able to get away with what I'm getting away with. Now, I say that, and in the same breath, I'm going to tell you that you need to also understand that because the predator has the mindset that they are the victim and they have the right to do what they're doing to you, they therefore also believe that what they're doing isn't wrong. And I talk about this in my classes and I say, well, if you went to my ex today and asked him what happened, his words are, I did what I had to do to handle her. And the only reason I didn't do it again is because I don't want to go to jail. And you go, well, but if you're going to go to jail for it, doesn't that mean it's something that's wrong to do? No, 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 no. He's going to then explain to you about how he's the victim and how his whole life law enforcement has been against him and the whole world has been against him and it was all my fault and all this stuff. He will never see me as a human being made of flesh and blood and bones. He will never see the bruises that covered my body. He will never see me as a human being because he is too focused on that he is the victim. And me being covered in bruises was just a consequence of my actions in continuing the victimization of him. And so his his apologies were all in an effort to protect himself, his image, his life. A lot of domestic violence victims will talk about the circle of friends that they had. And that's probably a whole another topic to talk about. But just to kind of touch base on it, um, actually, most abusers are actually very charming, what look like caring person because they have to try so hard to manipulate the people around them. It is so important to them what their appearance is to other people because that is critical to their end game, which is about having that power and control over another person. Because what makes them not a victim is when they finally have that power and control. That's the only thing that makes them feel like they're not the victim anymore, is by having that power and control over another person. Unfortunately, because of the experiences that they've had, it's a twisted, deformed perception of what power and control over another person has. And so it's taken to that extreme level of power and control. And that's where we see it becoming abusive. So they will never see you as the victim, and therefore all of their actions. And so at some point, there is this anger, this aggression, this frustration that comes out. And for example, in my situation, my abuser was losing control. I was one of those kinds of just, go with it. I'm good. You're in control. You're in charge, whatever. We're a partnership, and you bring skills and I bring skills, and some things you're better at. And so, you go for it. And I didn't look at it as, he controlled the money. No. Why do two people there don't need to be two bosses. It's just, hey, here's a set of rules that we agree on, and you manage that. I'm the one who went to the grocery store and made the meal plan and did the stuff in the kitchen. Was I controlling? No, it's just that's the skills that I had made me the best person to do that. Does that mean I was the only person who cooked? No, he went to the grocery store with me, and I went to the bank, and, so we had these balances. I didn't think of it as, power and control. But anytime that I would dip into that area and ask questions, for example, even though he was in charge of like the money and the accounts, I did a lot of the paperwork. And so, filing bank deposit slips and statements and things like that. And all of a sudden, we're getting deposit slips and mail from a bank that we don't have an account from. That clearly shows that an account was open and money is being deposited in it. And he wasn't hiding it from me because we had a pile of deposit slips, and he was putting the new deposit slips in there. He wasn't hiding this fact. But when I came to him and I said, hey, I got this deposit slip for a different bank. I'm just kind of curious as to what's the scoop. Suddenly there was this aggression um, in the form of defensiveness. And he, well, why are you questioning my actions? Uh, because there's another bank account, and I don't know anything about it. And I'm the one who files, the stuff. And there was this attitude. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm suspicious because you're getting defensive. And instead of just saying, hey, I went to our bank and there was an issue and they pissed me off, and I wasn't satisfied with the customer service I was getting. And so, being mad at them, I went across the street and opened up a bank account over there to go, F you to them. Instead of just saying that, hey, I was in the moment, I was, having this frustration, it became, he got defensive against me, and it added to his belief that the world is against him, including me. And so that was if I could look back and say that there was a sign, it would have been that it seemed like every time there was an argument, it was, why do you make it seem like I'm against you? And, and he would say, well, because the world is it's me against the world. Well, no, we're in a partnership. It's us against the world. And he always included me in a part of that, against me, against the world. But again, first of all, we're not talking about the signs, because again, that's probably a whole nother video we could go. But, you know, like a lot of relationships and things like that, you don't see all the signs in the beginning, but they also weren't, they were very subtle signs, and they weren't signs of abuse. They were just signs of you know, two different people in a relationship, and maybe this wasn't going to be a relationship that, worked because of the issues that he had, but nowhere did I ever see signs that, you know, many of us, when confronted, get defensive. Does that mean that we're abusive or that we will become physically abusive? Not at all. And so, him getting defensive on things, it wasn't logical, but I get it. I get that people, get defensive. And he wasn't verbalizing what he was really feeling. And so, it was just a part of our relationship. And I pushed it and eventually got what actually happened, once I was able to get him past the defensive point. So, totally went off topic there, um, but a lot of people think that there's going to be this, you know, screaming and yelling and, hurting a person right from the get-go. And the reality is that that's what I was talking about. Um, it's important to an abuser what other people think of them, because they don't want people to find out how they're having power and control over another person. Here's what's is so funny and interesting. The irony is that all of these actions that an abuser takes to have that power and control, at the same time that they don't think that it's anything wrong with it and that they have the right to do it, they're also doing actions that help to prevent it from being exposed, which again screams that it's wrong. If you're trying to hide what you're doing, doesn't that mean that it's wrong? Well, no. Well, then why are you trying to hide it? Well, they can't answer that question, because it all has to do with, with up here, and the psychology of it. And that's not our issue and that's not our problem. That's for, psychologists and all that kind of stuff to handle. But we need to understand that, you know, that's a red flag. The problem is as a human being, an imperfect human being who is flawed in relationships myself, how the heck am I supposed to see that this person is covering up their power and control, for it to be a sign that this is an abusive person? Well, that's not easy, and it's most of us don't have the ability to do that, especially when you're in the moment, in the relationship. I share the experience that one of the things that, I had, one of my vulnerabilities was that, you know, in my 20s and early 30s, especially my 20s, I wasn't looking to get married. I wasn't looking to get into a serious relationship, have kids, get married, that whole thing. I wanted to live life and I wanted somebody, with me. I wasn't concerned if we lived together or I wasn't looking at that, long term partnership. And if it did end up being a long term partnership, you know, I it could just be the way that it is. If it's working, why change it? Let's just continue to live on forever. And so unfortunately, that attitude, I did not make some of the best picks on who to spend my life with. And so I didn't have bad relationships, but I didn't have great relationships. And so and then get into this relationship with this person who shows so much concern. And we kind of, once we were married and living together, There was things like, um, I made friends with someone and started hanging out with them. And one day it was, hey, I was thinking, you're going out and hanging out with, Betty Sue quite a bit. I think that's awesome that you've, got this great friend. Um, but I was thinking maybe, write down her number, put it on the fridge so that, you know, God forbid anything happen, if I'm trying to get a hold of you and I can't get a hold of you, like, you know, I have a number for, who you're with, or, whatever. I can call them. I can, contact them. And a certain part of it seems odd, but, I'd never had anyone like really care that much that, and it wasn't like he was constantly texting me, where are you, who are you with, anything like that. So if I had had that kind of action paired with them asking me for that information, then maybe I would have put it together and come up with, this person seems a little bit controlling. But it wasn't like that. It was just a, hey, you know, you're over at this person's house, you're out with them, just in case there's an emergency, you want to just write their number on a piece of paper and put it on the refrigerator, with everyone else's emergency, everyone else's phone numbers and different things like that. Um, and then there was a time where he had texted one of my friends and said, hey, Patty's been feeling down. I'd really like to do something for her. Do you have any suggestions? Again, as a single individual action, I seemed pretty special. And even that friend had made a comment at one point that they were pretty impressed with that. And that's what it then comes down to, is that he wasn't trying to control me with those actions. He was manipulating those people, and he wanted them to have a certain perception of him, so that if something bad happened and I said something bad about them, or, let it out, that, when that whole experience happened and I came out and started telling everyone, hey, he became physically abusive with me, nobody believed me, because they were like, what? But he's, such a great guy and so caring and so loving, and all those things. That was a big part of his actions, were manipulating those around us, so that he had control over their perception of him. And so nowhere in there was there this anger, like you would think. He didn't throw things, he didn't yell, we didn't call each other names. It wasn't like that. Um, and as a matter of fact, the verbal manipulation wasn't even the typical, um, you're no good. He didn't say things like that. Instead, it was, you know, nobody's ever treated you like I have, because I'm the only one who's seen how much you deserve. And that was true. He made me feel like I deserved to be treated special, like I deserved to be cared about. And that's what his actions were. Um, but he was a really good manipulator. And maybe that's the difference, is someone who doesn't know what they're doing, has to use anger, and aggression to control, where somebody who has learned that skill, becomes a very good manipulator. But the reality is that, and when he was convicted, anger management classes was a part of his punishment. And I just thought it was such a joke because he managed his anger really well. That was the problem. The problem was that he managed his anger so well that there were no signs of him being an angry person. And I think that's sort of the reality that we need to have, is that it's not going to be obvious. It's not going to be signs that that this person is a bad person. Um, there are situations, and as someone who is an educator, for example, there's a video uh, that I'm a facilitator for called Escalation, and it is geared towards high school and college age women particularly. And in the video, it's showing signs of a relationship that is abusive and controlling. And in the video, it's much more subtle than many other videos, but it's also obvious, but it has to be obvious for you to be able to see it. But the reality is that um, it could be very, very subtle, because many predators, and especially the more that this goes on, and the more access that we have with social media and things like that, where our lives are much more exposed, it becomes more and more important for predators to find ways to hide their actions so that they can get away with it. And so um, that becomes the key. The myth is that an abuser will be angry, but the truth is that an, a predator, an abuser, can be anything they want to be. Stay safe and have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.